Hello, readers by eyes and by ears. This is Mari Chan, and welcome back to my YouTube channel. I hope you all had a lovely couple of days in this week. We are continuing with the reading of Peerless, also known as Wu Shuang by Meng Xi Shi, and we're covering chapters 11 through 15. So I hope you all enjoy. Chapter 11. How strange, said Feng Xiao. This isn't your house, and you didn't invent those words or their pronunciation. We're in a public space, but I'm not even allowed to speak? Is there no law in this land? Feng Xiao kept his gaze fixed on the young man as he shoved the meat into Cui Buchu's bowl. Cui Buchu slid the bowl away, but it was like the chopsticks had eyes. They perfectly followed his movements and dipped into his bowl with unerring accuracy. Cui Buchu glared at the meat in his bowl as if he could see traces of saliva from Feng Xiao's chopsticks on it. Never mind the food, he didn't even want to touch the bowl anymore. But it seemed Feng Xiao wasn't done. He pushed a plate of fried beans toward Cui Buchu. Are the meat dishes not to your taste? That's fine. They're still beans. Here, I'll peel them for you, white and tender. Hurry up and try one. Or shall I feed you? Oh, God. Cui Buchu watched him in silence. Feng Xiao's hands were beautiful, peeling beans with the same grace as plucking flowers. In the blink of an eye, a pile of peeled beans appeared before Cui Buchu, each one neatly arranged. Pei Jingzhou was speechless. Eat, said Feng Xiao. Cui Buchu knew Feng Xiao was doing this on purpose, but still couldn't help his lips twitching. He turned his head to look out the window, pointedly ignoring Feng Xiao. Someone else lost their temper instead. You... Su Xing's face was flushed with anger. He rose from his seat to march over, but the girl next to him grabbed his sleeve. Let it go, cousin, she whispered, looking deeply embarrassed. That man there is Abbot Cui. This person must be his friend. He's the one who started it. I'm going to give that guy a piece of my mind. Incense. Su Xing roared at Feng Xiao. You look like a gentleman, but you speak like a boor. Where are your manners? The girl bowed to Cui Buchu. Has Abbot Cui been well? Cui Buchu evidently knew her too. May the blessing of the gods be upon you, little Lu Niangzi. Is your mother well? Yes, all thanks to Abbot Cui's prescription. The girl smiled. Her heart palpitations have been greatly alleviated. Cui Buchu nodded. The prescriptions of this humble Taoist can only alleviate the symptoms for a time. They cannot cure her affliction. The Lu family should look for some skilled physicians for her. As you say, Abbot Cui, the girl said gently. Su Xing turned his attention to them. So, it was Taoist Master Cui that helped treat my aunt? Her health has indeed improved a lot recently. This Su thanks you deeply. He cupped his hands and bowed at Cui Buchu, then said, Forgive me for my bluntness. The Taoist master's friend here is far too rude. Considering your reputation, it would be best if you didn't associate with such a person. You're mistaken, said Cui Buchu. He's not my friend. I hardly know him. Su Xing eyed Feng Xiao doubtfully, his skepticism written clear on his face. Feng Xiao smiled. Why are you looking at me like that? Though my looks are peerless throughout the land, and my charm a rare treasure few have enjoyed, all of it is quite out of your league. Cui Buchu was speechless again. Su Xing's complexion cycled from green to white, then from white to green, as though he'd come down with food poisoning. But with Cui Buchu and Lady Lu watching, even if he wanted to rip into Feng Xiao, he couldn't. Finally, he turned and stalked sullenly away. Feng Xiao watched the couple leave. His frivolous smile vanished, replaced with a look of deep thought. That Su Xing is a bit odd. Is that why you introduced him to me? Since Lu Ti has no sons, he's raised Su Xing as his son-in-law ever since he took the boy in. Su Xing devotes himself to his studies, but his academic talents are average at best. However, he's shown promise as a businessman. Lu Ti was pleased to see it. He's already given Su Xing 2 shops to manage. That's still odd, said Feng Xiao. If his skill is in managing business, you'd expect him to know how to handle prickly customers. Why did he lose his temper just because I mimicked him? Cui Buchu sniped. Perhaps Feng Langjun's face simply enrages whoever looks at it. No matter where you go, everyone finds you disagreeable. Feng Xiao smiled. How can that be? Just now, Lady Lu was gazing at me with such awe and admiration. Cui Buchu had met narcissists before, but this was the first time he'd encountered such an extreme example. He stared at Feng Xiao in disbelief. Does Feng Langjun often look in the mirror to admire his own reflection? Not often, always, Pei Jingjia observed silently. Feng Xiao raised an eyebrow. Did I not speak the truth? Cui Buchu snorted coldly. He couldn't be bothered to keep arguing. The natural conclusion is that he acts differently before Lady Lu than his customers. Lady Lu likes his fiery temper, so he flares up in front of her. Lu Ti likes clever people, so he plays the bright and studious youth for him. Most interesting, said Feng Xiao. Chu, you figured out practically everyone during your 2-month stay in Liugong City. Even the woman of the Lu family hasn't escaped your eyes. Those who know you know you're a Taoist, but those who don't might think you're planning something shady. Cui Buchu chuckled, his smile bright and fake. But haven't I still fallen into the demonic clutches of the Zhejian Bureau's Feng Arlong? Now you're incorrect, said Feng Xiao. The Zhejian Bureau was established by decree of the emperor, with equal authority to the Ministry of Justice. All this about demonic clutches, aren't you criticizing His Majesty? Rest assured, I won't forget this. Worry not, I've got a longer memory than you, Cui Buchu thought. He coughed feebly twice, trying to conserve his strength. When the three had finished their meal, they walked together to Linlan Pavilion's Liugong City branch. Unbeknownst to Feng Xiao and Pei Jingjia, soon after they left, a man and woman entered the private second-floor room. The woman spoke first. The Lord Chief's complexion looked very poor just now. Has he fallen ill again? She had a voice as cold as snow and ice, yet her face was extraordinarily beautiful. The contradiction existed in perfect harmony, like a soaring swan or an orchid in bloom. Even without an observer to appreciate it, her beauty illuminated heaven and earth. The man beside her didn't answer. He walked over to the table where Cui Buchu and the others had been eating. After leaning down to look for a while, he suddenly swept aside the beans on the table. The woman came around the table to join him. What did the Lord Chief leave us? Cold plum blossom fragrance, the man said quietly. The woman frowned. The Lord wants us to find a perfume with the fragrance of cold plum blossom? The man said shortly, Khotan, homicide case. He treasured words like gold and spoke as little as possible. Luckily, the woman had worked alongside him for many years. She could extract a complete thought from these few syllables. The cold plum blossom fragrance has something to do with the Khotanese homicide case, she said. But if the connection was obvious, the Zhejian Bureau would have found it already, and the Lord Chief wouldn't have left a clue for us. Either way, we should head to a perfume shop and ask some questions. Chapter 12. On the edge of the table, where Cui Buchu had sat earlier, 4 faint words had been carved into the wood with a fingernail. Cold plum blossom fragrance. The woman stared at those 4 words, worry lining her brow. The amount of strength the Lord Chief put into writing this, it looks like he's grown even weaker. I fear he's injured again. The man had never been talkative, but he couldn't help giving her a reminder. Qiao Xian, the Lord Chief has always done things his own way. Qiao Xian was unhappy. You've been with the Lord Chief this long and you still don't understand him? He knows his limits when it comes to cases, but never when it comes to his own body. Zhang Xuan Bodi didn't answer. He only looked at her with a gaze that said, But what can you do? Qiao Xian was disheartened, but indeed, there was nothing she could do. Cui Buchu had always been a man who never stopped until he achieved his goal. At present, Their options were to run straight to Feng Xiao, expose Cui Buchu's identity, and drag him back to their own headquarters, or follow his orders and proceed with the investigation of the murder. If Chao Xian ruined their Lord Chief's plans for the sake of his health, she could kiss her post at the Zuoyue Bureau goodbye. Of course, she'd considered all this. Chao Xian sighed silently. "It's late. The perfume shop," Jiang Tzu and Bodhi reminded her. "Let's go." Chao Xian swept a slender finger over the table, and the marks scratched into the surface vanished. The wood was now as smooth as if those words had never been. Liugong City had more than a few perfume shops. Lying as it did at the nexus of East and West, the city's perfume shops were known for using spices unique to the Western regions. The number of diversity of their fragrances surpassed even the shops of the capital. Chao Xian and Jiang Tzu and Bodhi had imagined that this cold plum blossom fragrance would therefore be easy to find. But after asking around all morning and visiting well nigh every perfume shop in the city, they ultimately managed to buy only 3 plum blossom perfumes. Come to think of it, it's quite a coincidence. Just before you two, another gentleman was here asking about cold plum blossom fragrance, tall and thin, and fairly young and handsome. The owner of the perfume shop raised his palm to mark the man's height. Chao Xian and Jiang Tzu and Bodhi exchanged a glance. There was no question of whom the man was talking about. This was Feng Xiao's subordinate, Pei Jingzhe. But that meant someone from the Zhejian Bureau had already followed this lead. Surely they would have found anything worth examining. So why had the Lord Chief gone out of his way to set his own people on the trail? Cui Buchu would never do anything pointless. There must be some detail they'd yet to discover. I can't speak for other shops, but my selection of perfumes is the most complete in Liugong City. If you're looking for plum blossom fragrances, we have 3 here. One of these recipes was gifted to me by an itinerant merchant from the western regions a few years back, after I saved his life. As he spoke, the shop assistant brought out 3 round cakes of compressed perfume. Most martial arts practitioners possessed a keen sense of smell. Wearing perfume would give away their whereabouts if they needed to flee or hide from an enemy. In Chao Xian's position, she used perfumes even less. People like her, who rarely came into contact with such fragrances, were more sensitive to them. She could discern the scents presented almost instantaneously. These are plum and apricot blossoms? Chao Xian sniffed the perfume cake in her hand, then handed it to Jiang Tzu and Bodhi. The shopkeeper nodded. Correct. This perfume is called Spring Snow. It's the most popular fragrance in the capital currently. Young ladies adore it, especially ones from wealthy families. When spring comes, they put on fresh new clothes, then daub themselves with the perfume. A touch of this fragrance and a celestial maiden like yourself would have suitors practically breaking down your door. The man had a silver tongue. Even when confronted with customers who'd only come to make inquiries, he was doing his utmost to persuade them into a purchase. Now this perfume is still called Still Waters Run Deep. The shopkeeper picked up a second cake. It contains the scents of both sandalwood and plum. Nothing's better for calming one's nerves and driving away evil. Jiang Tzu and Bodhi sniffed it and shook his head. Chao Xian agreed. It's not the cold plum blossom fragrance we're looking for. The shopkeeper handed them the third cake. If it's a pure plum blossom fragrance you're after, this is the only one. Jiang Tzu and Bodhi took it in hand. The thick scent of plum blossom burned like fire as it wafted toward his nose. Yet the biting crispness intrinsic to the flower seemed to be missing. Instead, this fragrance smelled closer to the rich, sweet scent of peonies. When Chao Xian saw Jiang Tzu shake his head, she took the round of compressed perfume and sniffed it herself. Sure enough, this wasn't the fragrance they sought. Master, you're quite knowledgeable. Is cold plum blossom fragrance really so difficult to create? The shopkeeper considered for a moment. For normal perfumes, the stronger the scent, the better. But cold perfumes are called cold for a reason. They're different from the rest. If it's a true cold plum blossom fragrance, a first sniff will merely yield the faint, clean scent of snow and ice. Only after an hour or so will the aroma of plum blossoms gradually emerge. Even then, it will be sharp but not strong. The scent lingers and can last for several days. Qiao Shen recalled that Feng Xiao and his men hadn't arrived on scene until the morning after the murders. Yet, they'd still detected the fragrance. She nodded in agreement. So, I'd imagine only extraordinary people can wear such a fragrance? There are different types of cold fragrances, the shopkeeper said. Cold lotus fragrances and cold bamboo fragrances, for example. But the term cold is especially fitting for plum blossom fragrance. Plum blossoms bloom in late winter and carry the scent of snow and ice. Such fragrances are terribly rare. Several years ago, I got my hands on a cold lotus perfume and couldn't bring myself to sell it. I intend to leave it to my daughter as part of her dowry. Cold plum blossom perfumes are even more exceptional. Anyone who could create such a fragrance would certainly treasure it and hide it away. They wouldn't share the formulation lightly, or everyone on the street would be wearing it. Then it would no longer be precious. Can you think of anyone who knows how to create this cold plum blossom fragrance? The shopkeeper's smile was strained. If I did, I would have hired them long ago for a vast quantity of gold, and I certainly wouldn't be telling you all this. Rare fragrances can't be sought out, only encountered through serendipity. I've been in the perfume business half my life. If you find a person with such a skill, please don't hesitate to inform me. He paused, then smacked his head. That's right. Last month, little Yun Nyangzi from Chunxiang House won a dance championship, stunning most of Liugong City. I heard that lately she changes the fragrance she wears every day, but she's never sent anyone to purchase from me. She must be consulting some expert. Why not ask her? Both Qiao Xian and Jiang Zun Bodi's eyes lit up. When the previous gentleman came to ask, did you tell him about this? Asked Qiao Xian. The shopkeeper shook his head. I didn't recall it then, so of course not. Chunxiang House is a dance house? The shop owner gave a suggestive smile then, one all men understood. Qiao Xian understood too. She realized her question was rather foolish. Fragrant flowers, herbs, and spices had always been medicinal ingredients. In this way, perfumery and medicine were not unalike. Cui Buchu had a superior understanding of medicine, so it was unsurprising that he also had some understanding of perfumes. He'd inferred the rarity of the perfume merely from the words cold plum blossom fragrance and pieced the clues together from there. Qiao Xian and Jiang Zun Bodi were well acquainted with their Lord Chief's incredible aptitude. Most people were superficial. They saw Cui Buchu's weak and ailing body and underestimated him. But if a man in his circumstances could manage to stake out a place for himself within the vast and changeable world, they must certainly be possessed of extraordinary abilities. Even if Cui Buchu lay bedridden 8 out of 10 days, not a single person in the Zuoyue Bureau dared underestimate him. Qiao Xian's mood had lightened considerably with this discovery. If the Jiejian Bureau knew Wu Wei House was the Zuoyue Bureau's base, wouldn't they vomit blood and rage? Though her face remained icy, her tone was now relaxed. Jiang Zun Bodi responded with a different question. Chunxiang House, shall we go, or shall I? I'll go, of course, said Qiao Xian. With that face of yours, if you go, you'll be taken for a debt collector. No one would think you're there for entertainment. Jiang Zun Bodi couldn't refute it. He turned the prayer beads in his hand and said no more. Lin Long Pavilion. Today was the final day of the auction, and the hall was more crowded than ever. The threshold for entering had likewise risen. Not only did attendees require invitations, they also had to pay a deposit at the door. If they bid on something, the deposit would be put toward their item. If nothing caught their fancy, Linlong Pavilion would return them their fee when they left. This approach effectively weeded out those who came to make trouble, those who couldn't afford anything, or those who only wished to spectate. Feng Xiao had just led Cui Buchu and Pei Jingzhe inside when a voice behind them exclaimed, "If it isn't Feng Er!" The newcomer caught up to them with quick strides and regarded Feng Xiao with surprise and joy. "Feng Er, long time no see. I didn't expect to find you here." The man was in his mid-20s, wearing a tall crown and red clothes. He had the graceful and confident bearing of an aristocratic young master. But Cui Buchu's eyes were sharper than most. He immediately observed that this man's attitude toward Feng Xiao was rather unusual. Even when old friends reunited, this level of enthusiasm and eagerness bordering on solicitude was odd. Yet, it didn't seem like this man was trying to ingratiate himself with Feng Xiao either. As Cui Buchu considered this puzzle, Feng Xiao's eyebrows shot up in surprise and he smiled. "Young Estate Master Lin, it's been a while." When Cui Buchu heard this name, in combination with the man's age and conduct, the young master's background instantly fell into place. Yangdang Mountain Estate housed a middle-class family prominent in the Jianghu. They were primarily merchants, and wealthy ones at that. The 13 forms of the Yangdang sword technique had been passed down through the generations, but Estate Master Linlong had only managed to sire a son in his later years. Not unexpectedly, this meant he heeded his child's every whim and gave him whatever he wanted, even turning a blind eye to his more ridiculous habits. Yangdang Mountain Estate's renown within the Jianghu came not from the Lin family's wealth nor the Yangdang sword techniques they wielded, but from Lin Yong. Just as Lin Yong, beaming, was about to step forward and grab Feng Xiao's hand, Feng Xiao seamlessly took a small step back and slid his arm around Cui Buchu's shoulders. Before Cui Buchu could react, he'd been dragged to Feng Xiao's side, their shoulders knocked against each other. "Allow me to introduce you two. Young Estate Master, this is a dear friend of mine, Cui Buchu. Chu. This is the young master of Yangdang Mountain Estate, Lin Yong." He put delicate emphasis on the words "dear friend," his lips curving in an ambiguous smile. Any listener would find it dubious and their imagination would run wild. Cui Buchu was utterly flummoxed. Chapter 13. The moment the words "dear friend" were spoken, the eyes Lin Yong had turned upon Cui Buchu narrowed with hostility. Now that Cui Buchu had placed Lin Yong, he also remembered the rumors about him. He made to brush Feng Xiao's hand away without a second thought, but that hand clung to him as if it was glued. He couldn't push it off no matter how he tried. Lin Yong's eyes flashed as he smiled. "Cui Longjun must be very special indeed if he is Feng Er's dear friend. The Cui in Cui Longjun's name. Would it be the Cui family of Boling or the Cui family of Qinghe?" "It's just Cui." Cui Buchu's face was carefully blank. "I'm from neither Boling nor Qinghe. I'm only a commoner. My humble name is not worth mentioning." The more he insisted on his ordinariness, the more unconvincing Lin Yong found him. Cui Buchu's steps were weak and unsteady, his face drawn and pale. His brow and eyes were lined with fatigue. It was obvious he didn't know any martial arts and was plagued by illness. Why would such a man receive Feng Er's favor? It was truly bizarre. Several years ago, Feng Er had encountered Lin Yong as the latter was embroiled in some minor trouble. With his help, Lin Yong had managed to extricate himself from the situation. Back then, Feng Er had seemed to descend from the heavens, awing Lin Yong at first sight. No one had been able to catch his eye since. Feng Er, however, wasn't remotely interested in him that way. What was more, Feng Xiao was a powerful martial artist. Even if he wanted to, Lin Yong couldn't force himself on him. Were you thinking about doing that? Wait, sorry. I'll read that again. Even if he wanted to, Lin Yong couldn't force himself on him. He might end up losing his life if he tried. Thus, he restrained his lustful impulses and acted as warm and active as possible toward Feng Xiao, hoping the man would come around eventually. But Fengar's whereabouts were erratic, and Lin Yong to date hadn't pinned down his background or identity. He never knew where Fengar would resurface, so reuniting with him at this moment was truly a pleasant surprise. Lin Yong thought himself quite handsome, so the idea that Feng Xiao preferred this invalid elicited a wave of resentment. He was about to say more when Feng Xiao smiled and led Sui Buchu inside, throwing a "we'll be going ahead" over his shoulder. Sui Buchu found himself alternately dragged and prodded into the room. Feng Xiao's gestures looked soft and intimate, but they left no room for resistance. Lin Long Pavilion had 2 floors arranged around a central atrium. The lower level held the auction floor surrounded by guest seating. From the second level, one had a full view of the central area over the railing. Feng Xiao and Sui Buchu took their seat on the second floor's south side. Tea and snacks had already been placed on the low table, and the waiters didn't shout the way those in wine pavilions or restaurants usually did. Even their footsteps were soundless. The hush was contagious. Most guests kept their voices down as well, while the melody of the pipa drifted in from afar and lent the whole a hint of sophisticated charm. It felt more like they were inside a dance house than in Lin Long Pavilion's branch doing business. Sui Buchu gave the hall a quick scan. The first floor was mostly composed of ordinary wealthy merchants and residents of the Jianghu, while the second held young people from noble families. In contrast to the tranquility of the second floor, the first was far rowdier. Lin Long Pavilion had obviously separated the two on purpose, perhaps to avoid any unnecessary trouble. They ascended the stairs and turned a corner, slipping behind the screen and finally shaking off Lin Yong's unswerving gaze. At almost the same time, Feng Xiao released Sui Buchu and shoved him inside, as if terrified he'd catch something nasty if he touched him a moment longer. Sui Buchu silently made another black mark in his mental ledger, then found a place to sit with no change in expression. Feng Xiao seemed oblivious, his face wreathed in smiles. Judging by your expression, you know of Lin Yong's predilections. Is that why you used me to mess with him? Sui Buchu was annoyed. This wasn't included in the conditions of our agreement. Feng Xiao looked back at him innocently. I still took you out to see the world today, did I not? What's wrong with asking for a little something in return? Anyway, he can't hurt you with me around. Lin Yong might have some indecent hobbies, but he's no fool, said Sui Buchu coolly. It'd be far more believable if you used Pei Jingzhe rather than me. Pei Jingzhe, who'd been drinking his tea in silence, choked and coughed. Feng Xiao smiled. It wouldn't work. You're better looking. He'd hardly finished speaking when Lin Yong's silhouette appeared behind the screen. It's really too noisy downstairs. I can't get a moment of peace. Would Fengarlang mind if I intruded? Seconds before, there had been more than a foot of space between Feng Xiao and Sui Buchu. But the instant Lin Yong's voice rang out, Feng Xiao grabbed Sui Buchu's wrist and leaned in close, lips curving in a doting smile. Chu-chu, there's dust on your nose. Let me brush it off for you. Okay, let me just stop for a moment. I know I normally don't do this, but I'm probably going to be laughing a lot in this series. I just feel it. So I'm warning you guys now. Sometimes I might edit them out, but if it's too many laughs in one recording, you're just going to have to sit with them, okay? So let's continue. The stare Lin Yong directed at Sui Buchu became increasingly intense. Sui Buchu saw a flash of killing intent in his eyes, but only a flash. Lin Yong quickly regained his graceful and confident demeanor, as if what Cui Buchu saw had been an illusion. Though Yangdang Mountain Estate was only a mid-tier martial arts family in context of the entire Jianghu, people still showed Lin Yong respect on account of his father's generosity and hospitality. Feng Xiao, however, cared not a whit for such things. My apologies. I'm afraid there is no room. Feng Xiao's smile was pleasant, but his words were a blunt rejection. Lin Yong hadn't given up yet, but before he could say more, Pei Jingzhe stepped in front of him. This way, young estate master Lin. Then let's talk another day, Lin Yong said reluctantly. Feng Xiao gave a slight nod. He showed Lin Yong no respect at all, but Lin Yong didn't express displeasure. To Lin Yong, Feng Xiao was like the shadow of a soaring bird, a man who revealed no hints as to his true name and background. He seemed to appear out of thin air in the Jianghu, coming and going without a trace. That mysterious allure of his had snared Lin Yong completely. Otherwise, why would he still be yearning for him? Lin Yong couldn't help but shoot one last glance at Cui Buchu as he went. Cui Buchu's lashes were lowered, leaving his expression unclear as Feng Xiao lightly grasped his wrist and swung it back and forth. Lin Yong sneered in his heart. So, Cui Buchu was only a plaything. He shook out his sleeves and left. By the time Feng Xiao released his wrist, Cui Buchu had lost his look of displeasure. Instead, he looked thoughtful. As deputy chief of the Jiejian Bureau, there was no need for Feng Xiao to treat Lin Yong's feelings with any delicacy, let alone hold up Cui Buchu as a shield. Yet despite Lin Yong's repeated advances, Feng Xiao hadn't fallen out with him. In fact, he'd even left the door open. There had to be a reason behind it. What are you thinking? Need me to clarify something? Feng Xiao's voice was right beside his ear. Cui Buchu suddenly had a thought. Is the Jiejian Bureau investigating Lin Yong? Feng Xiao's eyes flashed. What makes you think so? Cui Buchu didn't answer immediately. Could Lin Yong be connected to the assassination of the envoy? He thought. No, that couldn't be it. Yangdang Mountain Estate was thousands of miles from Liugong City. In the normal course of things, they had no dealings with Khotan or even with Linlang Pavilion. Lin Yong had likely only turned up to watch the show. There was, however, a small point of connection. One of the products the Lin family traded in was a silk called sky-cleansed gauze, which was produced in the south. Its luster was bright as the sky, its texture smooth as ice on a frozen lake. Officials and nobles alike adored it, and it had been listed as one of the tributes in the convoy. The Lin family sent some to the Sui Palace every year. Trading this silk had been key to the Lin family's early success, and rumor had it that lately they'd been trying to use it to approach the Sui crown prince. Feng Xiao allowed him to ponder. Chu, with your abilities, remaining an unnamed and lowly spy within the Zuoyue Bureau is really too unfair to you. Right now, the Jiejian Bureau has 3 chiefs. If you wish to join us, I'll tell my superiors to have you established as the 4th bureau chief. Off to the side, Pei Jingzhe's eyes widened. He held his tongue with some effort. The Jiejian Bureau stood on equal footing with the 6 ministries. The bureau chief was also the Minister of Justice, and Feng Xiao, his deputy, had the authority to act independently when necessary. The power he held was enormous. Cui Buchu might be from the Zuoyue Bureau, but his rank and identity were unknown. Yet now, Feng Xiao wanted to appoint him as the 4th bureau chief? It was a grand offer, almost too grand. Pei Jingzhe couldn't tell whether Feng Xiao truly wished to recruit more talent or if he was only trying to test Cui Buchu. Cui Buchu's expression was placid as he slowly raised his head. What is this Zuoyue Bureau? I don't understand a word you're saying. Feng Xiao took Cui Buchu's hand in his. You're in poor health, yet here you are toiling in this border city, plotting and scheming with no one to appreciate your efforts. I just think it's a pity. The Jiejian Bureau lacks a strategist like you. If you're willing, I'll tell the Zuoyue Bureau myself. I promise I won't offend your superiors. What do you think? He tucked away his smile and stared intently at Cui Buchu, his face shining with sincerity. The sight was enough to make an iron tree bloom and a stone shed tears. For the first time, Cui Buchu realized there existed someone who could drive others out of their mind with looks alone. Perhaps he himself had escaped being bewitched, but that didn't stop him from marveling at Feng Xiao's beauty, as brilliant as spring blooms. Feng Langjun, though your words are very touching, I don't know any Zuoyue bureau. I just want to live in peace as a Taoist priest. I hope you'll keep your promise and let me go. Seeing his attempts at seduction had failed, Feng Xiao's lip curled and he released Cui Buchu's hand. He leaned back and revealed his true colors. When did I promise to let you go? I said I'd consider letting you go. As for whether I can be persuaded, that all depends on your performance. Even acting the part of a scoundrel, Feng Xiao managed to be captivating. Cui Buchu couldn't help but silently curse him. Shameless man. As the two of them traded barbs, the crisp sound of a bell rang out, and a middle-aged man walked to the center of the floor downstairs. Everyone's attention was immediately drawn to him. The main event had begun. Chapter 14. Linlong Pavilion's auction was famous. As their name spread, many pawn shops and jewelry stores imitated them and put on their own auctions using various gimmicks. Unfortunately, none could compare to the wealth and scale of Linlong Pavilion. An invitation to Linlong Pavilion's auction was rare and more precious than gold. Many regarded them as a status symbol, and receiving one was considered a great honor. If Feng Xiao wanted an invitation, he had no problem obtaining one even without flaunting his identity. But others treasured what might be a once-in-a-lifetime chance. On this occasion, there were more than a few first-time attendees. They immediately quieted down when they saw the auctioneer appear. Esteemed guests, today is the final day of the auction. Thank you for taking time out of your busy schedules to join us. Linlong Pavilion has been honored by your presence. Now, we know everyone is waiting eagerly. Without further ado, we present our first item. The auctioneer didn't strain to be heard. His voice effortlessly resonated across the entire space. Though the special design of the atrium was a factor, he was likely also a master of internal cultivation. Linlong Pavilion was a grand enterprise and would naturally attract outside envy. It was no surprise that they'd hired martial artists from all over to oversee the auction. As the man's last words rang out, a beautiful maid came forward and presented a tray draped in gold and silk. Two young waiters, one on either side, whisked the cloth away to reveal a bronze wine vessel. This wine vessel was used by Duke Huan of Qi during the spring and autumn period. 3 characters are inscribed on the base of the vessel, which prove the owner's identity. This item has been appraised and judged genuinely by Dongyang Xiansheng of Linlong Pavilion. The starting price is 10,000 coppers, and will do the final call thrice. Let us begin. The maid pulled on a rope, and the bell rang again. Someone called, 11,000 coppers, 12,000, 13,000. Once the bidding started, noise in the hall swelled. Soon, someone called out a costly bid of 30,000. It wasn't that any of them were particularly interested in the bronze wine vessel itself. Most treasures from Linlong Pavilion would at least double in value once purchased. Even if the buyer didn't sell the item and instead gave it out as a gift, all they needed to say was, verified by Dongyang Xuansheng from Linlong Pavilion, and the recipient would be suitably impressed. Who was the one who bid 30,000? Feng Xiao asked Cui Buchu with great curiosity. He didn't participate in the bidding. He was far more interested in the bidders, and he was sure Cui Buchu would know the answer. As expected, Cui Buchu said, "The bidder's name is Leng Du, the adopted son of the chief helmsman of the 9 guilds of water transport. Recently, Chief Helmsman Ning Shiwo gifted a rare beauty to the Emperor of Southern Chun, Chen Shubao. She won Chen Shubao's favor, and he dotes on her. It seems she pleased Chen Shubao so much he handed a portion of the South's canal transport market to Ning Shiwo. Lung Du likely intends this wine vessel as a gift. Chen Shubao is the mighty emperor himself, so he'd see such a trinket as beneath him. The gift might instead be for one of Chen Shubao's attendants. I suspect he was determined to obtain this item, perhaps because he knew bidding wouldn't be as fierce for the first one. The 9 guilds of water transport weren't a single entity, but, as the name suggested, a conglomeration of 9. Within the Southern Martial Arts Circle, they were a force none could afford to underestimate. Among the 9 guilds, the Jinhuan Guild held the greatest power, and this Ning Shiwo, as their leader, was elected chief helmsman. Ning Shiwo was an ambitious man. Under his management, the 9 guilds of water transport had risen quickly, transforming with unstoppable momentum from a medium-sized business alliance into the leader of Jiangnan's martial arts circles. Though it was trivial for the Zhejian Bureau to investigate whomever they wished, it was ultimately more convenient to bring Cui Buchu along. He had every story and figure of the Jianghu committed to memory and could rattle off anyone's background and motives with a moment's thought. Even Pei Jingzhe was in awe of his abilities. He privately thought the Zuoyue Bureau was indeed full of talent. By the time Cui Buchu finished speaking, the final call for the bronze wine vessel had gone out and Lung Du had claimed the item. All had gone as Cui Buchu predicted. Cui Buchu had always been a pale and sickly person, and the collar of his thick coat was pulled up so high it obscured almost half his face. The mere sight of him slumped in his seat elicited a sympathetic wave of fatigue, yet when he spoke, it was with the clear confidence of a seasoned strategist. Listeners couldn't help but believe him. Feng Xiao clapped his hands in praise. "Ha! Cui really is amazing. Out of the masses here, only you possess any flicker of brilliance. I'll give you 3 out of 10. Cui Buchu pressed his lips together, refusing to respond. But Feng Xiao wouldn't be denied. He said, "Why don't you ask me where the remaining 7 points are?" "Even without asking, I already know," Cui Buchu said icily. Feng Xiao smiled. "It seems that you think the same. As they say, heroes are of one mind. 7/10 of the world's brilliance already belongs to me. Thus, the remaining 3/10 goes to you." Cui Buchu rolled his eyes in answer. Pei Jingzhe asked curiously, "Does Ning Shiwo have no children by birth?" Shaking his head, Cui Buchu answered, "Ning Shiwo and his wife have been married 19 years, but they were never blessed with a child. They adopted Lung Du and treat him as their son by birth. Ning Shiwo has already made it known that he'll retire next year. Barring any last-minute surprises, the position of Jinhuan Guild's leader should go to Ling Du, but Ling Du is young yet. Even the pressure of managing the Jinhuan Guild is too much for him. How the situation will develop remains to be seen." Pei Jingzhe listened to these remarks as he might to marketplace rumors, smiling but paying them little mind. To him, the feuds of the Jianghu lay too far to the south and were merely the internal trivialities of this guild or that guild. They had little to do with the north or great sway. Cui Buchi seemed to sense his thoughts. He said evenly, "If the emperor wishes to invade Chun, he must cross the river southward. Transportation by water will become vitally important. Should that time come, surely dividing these guilds from within and allowing chaos to break out is superior to seeing the 9 guilds of water transport assist the southern dynasty against Great Sway." Feng Xiao smiled but said nothing. He'd already thought that far ahead. But Pei Jingzhe had no such insight. He was stunned and cupped his hands toward Cui Buchu. "Ah, I see now." Pei Jingzhe's first impression of Cui Buchu had been that the man couldn't go more than a handful of words without coughing. Though he'd never said so aloud, he'd inevitably found himself looking down on him. After all, the Jiejian and Zuoyue bureaus were fundamentally unlike the 3 departments and 6 ministries. These sister agencies moved seamlessly between light and shadow. They had to summit the heights of the court while also walking the vastness of the Jianghu. Martial arts weren't a strict necessity, but with no skill at all, it was terrifyingly difficult to make one's way in martial arts circles where strength was king. Cui Buqiu was an exception. This man was from Liu Li Palace and knew the Jianghu and its people like the back of his hand, yet he had no martial skill of his own. Even now, though Feng Xiao was currently holding him hostage, he showed no sign of being at a disadvantage in word or action. No hint of flattery, nor pleas for mercy. Pei Jingzhi felt that, for a person like Cui Buqiu, ignorance of martial arts posed no problem. If they could convince this man to work under their deputy chief, the Jiejian Bureau would be like a tiger that grown wings. Next up for auction were 2 antiques, the zither Lu Qi and a sword known as Bai Hong. This zither was a famous one, and the sword was also a quality blade. Countless people jumped in with bids. Feng Xiao seemed mildly interested in Lu Qi and participated in several rounds of bidding. Finally, someone offered 3,000 taels of silver to secure the zither. Feng Xiao immediately dropped out. It seemed his interest didn't extend that far. Cui Buqiu watched him give up on the zither halfway, though he clearly wanted it, and he couldn't help but shoot him a questioning glance or 2. Feng Xiao caught his look, and his lips quirked up in a smile. I can let Lu Qi go. I have a much bigger and better treasure already. Would you like to see it? Oh, God. Cui Buqiu said nothing. He wasn't usually a person who hesitated to speak. If he wished, his words had the power to strip someone of their dignity and leave them ashen and disgraced. But when it came to dealing with scoundrels like Feng Xiao, he rarely needed to say anything. There had always been someone around to handle such people for him. Now he was like a dragon in shallow waters, temporarily trapped. He had to take action himself to confront Feng Xiao in this war of words. Besides, Cui Buqiu was no blushing maiden. Why should he give Feng Xiao the satisfaction of a flustered reaction? Thus, he fell quiet for only a moment before calmly saying, I'm waiting. Please pull it out. Feng Xiao clicked his tongue twice and said, Chu, you're too frivolous. Valuable things deserve respect. How could you tell me to pull it out so crudely? You should tell me to present it instead. I'm afraid if you do, your treasure will shrink to the size of a finger, and I'll be greatly disappointed. I'm talking about a zither, Feng Xiao exclaimed in surprise. What are you talking about? Cui Buqiu snorted. I'm also talking about a zither. Why do you think I'm not? Pei Jingzhi couldn't bear to listen to their conversation any longer. He raised his teacup to hide his twitching lips. Feng Xiao looked at Cui Buqiu with an expression that said, Keep it up. I dare you. And what kind of zither, pray tell, can both grow and shrink? Li Xuanji from Tiangong Workshop has recently invented a folding zither. When fully folded, it's only the size of a palm, but when unfolded, it's the size of a pipa. Feng Langjun is from the Jiejian Bureau. He should know all there is to know in the world, yet he doesn't know this. Although Li Xuanji is a genius craftsman, my zither is certainly finer than his. Feng Xiao smiled. It's also finer than Lu Qi. Still, Lu Qi is a famous zither. Even seeing it is a rare joy. If I could borrow this instrument and play it for a few days, I'd be even happier. The man who made the winning bid is named Cui Hao. He's the legitimate grandson of the patriarch of the Cui family of Boling, born to his second wife. The 8th day of the next month is his grandfather Cui Yong's birthday. Cui Yong loves the zither more than his life, and he's always loved Cui Hao in the same measure. The obvious conclusion was that Cui Hao had purchased the zither as a gift for his grandfather. Several more treasures were presented and quickly auctioned off one by one. Anyone who secured an invitation to Linlong Pavilion didn't lack money. In fact, publicly purchasing an item was sometimes a method of flaunting one's name and status and stoking one's vanity. These people rushed to bid on the auction items no matter how expensive. Most of the buyers were strangers to Feng Xiao and Pei Jingzhe, but Cui Buqiu recited all their details with ease. With the aid of his introductions, Feng Xiao could make a rough determination as to whether or not each person was connected to the case of the missing jade. Near noon, as the auction reached its halfway point, Linlong Pavilion staff brought plates of hot dishes and snacks to each table. Refreshed with full stomachs, the crowd's anticipation once again grew over the upcoming treasures. Pei Jingzhe could hardly sit still. He was starting to suspect that the Jade of Heaven Lake wouldn't appear here at all. But seeing that Feng Xiao and Cui Buqiu remained perfectly composed, he quashed his anxiety and sat back once more. At last, he heard the auctioneer's voice ring out. "The next item is a jade with no origin or name. It was delivered to Linlong Pavilion just yesterday, and Dong Yang Xiansheng has yet to appraise it. Guests purchase this item at your own risk. Whether it is genuine or not, we at Linlong Pavilion take no responsibility. We hope our esteemed guests understand." The man had mentioned this rule before, but now emphasized it again. Many of the more cautious bidders were already shrinking back. The item was removed from its carved lacquer box. When the sunlight streaming through the window rippled over its surface, the crowd gasped in surprise. Now Pei Jingzhe really couldn't remain still. He sat straight up and stared at the object in the maid's hand. The Jade of Heaven Lake. Chapter 15. As Feng Xiao and Cui Buqiu were waiting for the Jade of Heaven Lake to appear at Linlong Pavilion, a strange guest arrived at Chunshang House in Liugong City. The man had a shaved head and held prayer beads in his hand. One couldn't call him a monk because he was wearing common clothing, yet one couldn't say he wasn't because his expression was serene and devoid of all earthly desire. He didn't look like he'd come for entertainment, but more like he'd come to preach. The house's owner, Madame Xue, had received many odd guests over the years, but this was the first time she'd met one this odd. When she learned a man had ignored their closed doors and proceeded to enter, she pulled her hair haphazardly into a bun, yawned, and walked out under the protection of her armed escort. At the sight of the guest, Madame Xue was momentarily stunned. She buried her anger and donned a smile. "Good sir, Chunshang House doesn't entertain guests during the day. If you're interested, please return around 6 this evening." Zhang Sun Bodhi said, "I heard little Yunyun Yangzi moved half the city with her dancing recently. I came specially to see her." Madame Xue covered her mouth coyly and smiled. "Little Yunyun Yangzi? I'm afraid she's still dawdling at this hour, struggling to get out of bed and put on her makeup." If the regular customers of Chunshang House had seen the fiery and impatient Madame Xue being this courteous with a man who didn't understand the rules, their jaws would have hit the floor. But though Madame Xue had seen countless people come and go in her time, Zhang Sun Bodhi's handsome face colored her early morning temper enough that she could greet him with a smile. Zhang Sun Bodhi frowned slightly. "I'm only passing through Liugong City and will be gone by tonight. Can't I meet with her just this once?" He took out a brocade pouch and handed it to Madame Xue. When she opened it, she found herself stunned again. The pouch was filled with golden pearls from the South China Sea, round and heavy and glistening in the morning sunlight. Combined with Zhang Sun Bodhi's handsome face, the bag of golden pearls shattered her resistance. Forget Yunyun. If he'd requested Madame Xue herself, she'd have no objections. "Please step this way, sir. I'll call Yunyun right now." Zhang Sun Bodhi gave a slight nod, his gaze sweeping furtively around the front room. A lithe silhouette flashed past, then vanished from sight. If they'd wished to move in secret, it would of course have been best to come at night. Then there would be people coming and going from Chunshang House, decked in finery and fragrances, and it'd be easier for Zhang Sun Bodi and Qiao Xian to conceal their activities. But this advantage cut both ways. Night made it easier for their adversary to hide as well. Zhang Sun and Qiao Xian had discussed it, and both of them believed that a daytime visit gave them a better chance of catching their target off guard. Perhaps they could even lure the snake from its hole. Chunshang House was actually a sprawling complex of pavilions connected by winding walkways and corridors. A faint fragrance hung in the air, giving visitors the impression of beauties tucked away in their boudoirs. But as Zhang Sun walked behind Madame Xue, he only thought that this place had too many concealed corners and hidden nooks. Even if a martial expert sought someone here, as long as their target held their breath and stayed still, the sounds of the birds, fish, and insects would provide cover, and they might avoid discovery. "This is Yun Yun's residence. You may go up, though she might not be awake yet," Madame Xue said with a smile. Yun Yun was both a performer and a prostitute, and she wasn't a woman just anyone could have. But Zhang Sun had been too extravagant in offering this pouch of golden pearls right off the bat. There was only one Yun Yun, yet it could have purchased 10 of her. Madame Xue took her leave. Zhang Sun knocked twice, and the door opened promptly. A young girl stood in the doorway. "I'm here to see Yun Yun." The girl wasn't immediately angry. "Sir, don't you know the rules? The mistress doesn't entertain customers before dark. Please leave or I'll call someone over." "Madame Xue brought me here." The girl was stunned. Her anger turned to sadness, but in a flash that, too, was gone. Her face smoothed to placidity as she said, "My apologies. Please come in, sir. May I trouble you to wait in the front room for a moment? Little Yun Yun Nyangzi has not yet risen, so I will go and wake her myself." Zhang Sun nodded. "Thank you." The women in such houses took a great deal of care when dressing and adorning themselves. He settled in to wait. Zhang Sun looked around and saw a potted winter sweet plum before the window. It was curious to see it blooming in spring. He stepped over for a look and realized they were silk flowers, but finely crafted. The evenness of their color and the variety of shades made them indistinguishable from the real thing. "Do you think they're pretty?" came a gentle and melodious female voice from behind him. "I do." Zhang Sun Bodi turned to look at her. "Did you make them yourself?" Yun Yun smiled without speaking. Her dark hair had been casually pulled into a knot, and an outer garment draped loosely over her thin robe, creating an aura of languid intimacy. "As long as they're pretty, does it matter where they came from? Why has this gentleman arrived before evening? Did Madame Xue not stop you?" Zhang Sun Bodi's answer was typically concise. "A bag of golden pearls." Yun Yun understood at once. A giggle slipped from her. No wonder Madame Xue was willing to make an exception. She moved to hold Zhang Sun's hand, pressing herself against him. No matter how enthralling Yun Yun's dancing might be, what most of the men willing to spend thousands on her wanted was her body. The pleasure of a woman could be more cheaply obtained elsewhere. The real reason men flocked to her was to satisfy their ego by possessing her. Yun Yun understood this well, so she didn't play hard to get like other girls of the dance house. But Zhang Sun Bodi pushed her hand away. "I wish to see you dance." Yun Yun sputtered out a laugh. "Is the gentleman shy? Does he wish to see a dance first? That's fine also. However, there's no accompanying music here. I'll have to ask my maid to play the pipa." "I'm not shy," said Zhang Sun Bodi, "and I'm not putting on a virtuous act. I simply wish to see you dance." His expression was placid and unsmiling, yet this somehow gave more weight to his words. "Do you remember this?" He took a golden hairpin from his sleeve and handed it to her. A look of confusion passed over Yun Yun's face. Then her expression slowly cleared. As if recalling something, "You couldn't be the one in the alley on the east side." Zhang Sun nodded. 8 years ago, There was a young man living on the streets, starving and cold, close to death. You gave him a golden hairpin from your own hair and told him to pawn it to weather those difficult times. Later, when his circumstances improved, he repurchased the hairpin and kept it with him always. Today, that young man has come to return it to you and finish what he started. Yuan stared at the golden hairpin for a long time. Tears brimmed in her eyes, rolling down her cheeks to fall onto Jangsun Bodhi's palm. It's been 8 years. You've become a strong and stalwart man, while I've grown old. If you wish, I can redeem you, said Jangsun. Yuan wiped at her tears and smiled as she shook her head. I love the life I have, where everyone's eyes are on me, and I can indulge in what luxuries I wish. You needn't worry about me. Keep this golden hairpin to remember me by. What dance do you want to see? I'll perform it for you. After this reminiscence, Yuan's attitude toward Jangsun Bodhi had become genuinely intimate. No longer was she so distantly polite as she'd been at the beginning. Jangsun gazed at her intently for a moment, then tucked the golden hairpin back in his sleeve. In that case, I'd like a dance to the song, The Drunken East Wind. Linlong Pavilion was a flurry of chatter. The quiet scene had boiled over. People craned their necks to get a look at the lustrous crystalline jade in the maid's hand. Any further introduction from the auctioneer was unnecessary. Even those who knew nothing about jade could see this was a priceless treasure. So that's what the jade of Heaven Lake looks like? Pei Jingjia asked. It was true they'd speculated that the jade of Heaven Lake would appear at the auction, but none of them had imagined it'd be so openly. If the Zhejian Bureau simply shut down the auction and took the jade away, wouldn't their adversary's careful planning have been all in vain? He immediately considered the possibility it was a fake. But since Linlong Pavilion had brought the item out, there was no going back. Whether it was real or fake, they would have to obtain the jade to verify it. Due to the unknown provenance of this item, Linlong Pavilion isn't confident in our appraisal. The starting price is therefore lower than the other treasures we've seen here today, tentatively set at 5,000. If any honored guest is interested in increasing the price, please make your bid. As the auctioneer finished, someone called out a bid of 6,000 coppers and the price began to climb. Soon, it had increased to 50,000. But the hall roiled, and the bids kept coming. Clearly, the bidding wouldn't conclude any time soon. Even Lin Yong, who'd stayed out of the spotlight, joined in and called out a bid of 100,000. Someone immediately bid up the price again. Even if it wasn't the jade of Heaven Lake, a jade as precious as this one still had countless people vying for it. Additionally, news of the theft of the jade of Heaven Lake had spread underground, and quite a few well-informed people had caught wind of it. Despite the caveats of the auctioneer, the jade quickly became more coveted than any of the previous items. Pei Jingjia began. Sir, should we wait a little longer? Said Feng Xiao. The bidding had reached 3,000 taels of silver. Feng Xiao saw the bidders were restless and eager to continue. On his orders, Pei Jingjia called out a bid of 5,000 taels, throwing in 10 golden pearls from the South China Sea for good measure. The hall fell instantly silent as the crowd turned to look toward the source of this outrageous bid. Cui Buchu tugged his coat further up around his chin and turned aside, avoiding the many unwanted stares. Feng Xiao leaned over deliberately. You're not some young maiden. Why act so shy? What? Are they not even allowed to look at you? You're so flashy, Cui Buchu said coldly. I fear if I'm seen with you, I'll end up dead in my bed one night with no one the wiser. Feng Xiao chuckled and looped an arm around his waist. Then you can share a bed with me, he said silkily. I can guarantee you a peaceful night's sleep. Cui Buchu Suddenly, Cui Buchu stood and slapped Feng Xiao soundly across the face. The move was so blisteringly fast, not even Feng Xiao, the martial arts master, could react in time. He'd taken half the force of the blow before he managed to flinch backward. Shameless cad! Sleeping with my little sister wasn't enough for you, so now you're coming after me? This humble Taoist fled all the way to Liugong City, yet I still can't escape you. Is there no law or order in this world? Cui Buchu was in full view of the crowd, his tone severe and his expression fearsome. His face was white with anger, bringing to mind a slender stalk of bamboo amid snow, brittle yet refusing to break. Feng Xiao was struck speechless. He hadn't anticipated that Cui Buchu's silent forbearance had simply been him biding his time for this moment. All eyes were on Feng Xiao, and his image in them had completely transformed. Now this is truly awful luck, Feng Xiao thought to himself. Playing with fire and burning myself. That's a first. Chapter 16. Cui Buchu's accusations trailed off as he covered his mouth to cough. One cough followed another, each more punishing than the last. He was forced to double over, coughing until his body trembled, like frost-rimmed bamboo struggling in the wind. In the past 2 months, Zishao Monastery's reputation in Liugong City had soared. Though not all of those present were locals, there were plenty who recognized Cui Buchu. They called out, "Abbot Cui, what's wrong? Do you need help?" To think someone would commit such filthy and despicable acts in broad daylight. "Abbot Cui, come downstairs quick. We'll report it to the county magistrate this instant," someone else chimed in. Cui Buchu coughed a few times, then smiled bitterly. "This is Feng Langjun from the Jiejian Bureau. He has been ordered to investigate the Khotanese envoy's murder case. He insists I'm related to the case and has detained me against my will. Going to the county magistrate would be pointless. Thank you, everyone, for your kindness. I just really can't bear it." His eyes were watering with how violently he'd been coughing, but no one cared about the reason. All they saw was Cui Buchu's wan complexion and his piteous appearance, tears clinging to his eyelashes. Even Lin Yong, who thought highly of Feng Xiao, couldn't help wondering if Feng Xiao only looked like he had high standards and in fact had some peculiar fetishes. Not only did he pay no mind to gender, he had specifically gone for a barely breathing invalid. If that was the way it was, Feng Xiao's rejection of him made sense too. Lin Yong had begun to seriously contemplate whether he should start acting like an ailing beauty when Cui Buchu revealed Feng Xiao's background and gave him yet another shock. The Lin family had connections in the palace. Lin Yong was far better informed than the average member of the Jianghu. He was therefore aware of the significance of the name Jiejian Bureau. To think, he'd known nothing of Feng Xiao's identity, yet had held such improper intentions toward him. On reflection, he couldn't help finding his own bloated self-confidence rather laughable. The Linlong Pavilion auction had been brought to a halt. Even the auctioneer, a capable man prepared for all sorts of contingencies, found himself stunned and unsure what to do. That is, until Feng Xiao laughed. "Who says you can't have your cake and eat it too? Your little sister is a fair and lovely thing, and you're a brilliant man. What's wrong with having both of you? The Jiejian Bureau's status under the emperor is high enough that I can do as I please. Why call on the law for something so trivial? Cui, I've already trained your sister. Now it's your turn. If you come with me willingly, I guarantee that from now on you'll live a life of luxury and never suffer the slightest indignity." He smiled evilly at Cui Buchu, as if Cui Buchu really did have a sister Feng Xiao had abducted and kept as his personal property. "You have your schemes, but I have my countermeasures. Aren't we both tearing each other down? Who's afraid of you?" Cui Buchu sneered. "But is this the proper way to court someone? My sister told me that when she was with you, you had strange secret hobbies. Not only did you enjoy stripping down and letting her whip you, you wanted the whipping to be as painful as possible. If it wasn't painful enough, you torment her to within an inch of her life in bed. Aren't you afraid outsiders will find out about that?" The hall erupted. Pei Jingzhe was completely numb, watching without expression as these two engaged in public mutilation of each other's reputations. Lin Yong's mouth was agape. He looked utterly dumbfounded. Never had he expected Feng Xiao, with his dignified air and lofty demeanor, to have such private hobbies. Lin Yong considered his own situation. While being a cut sleeve wasn't something he could openly tell others, at least he was more normal in other areas. Feng Xiao's mouth twitched. He'd thought his reflexes fast, his willingness to debase himself strong. Yet now he realized there was always a higher mountain, always a greater man. This Cui Buchu had appeared like a bolt from the blue, and he was somehow even readier to debase himself than Feng Xiao. The two stared at each other, locked in a stalemate. Finally, Feng Xiao decided to call a temporary truce. They must first deal with the business at hand. He flicked his sleeve and said to the auctioneer, "These are my private affairs. No one else need concern themselves. If anyone has doubts they'd like to air, they may come to the Zhejian Bureau. Today's auction is not over yet. Surely it can't end here in such disarray." The auctioneer came to his senses and hastily said, "Of course. We still have no idea to which family this beautiful jade will go. Please take your seats, honored guests." Cui Buchu sat down once more, his expression serene. Falling into Feng Xiao's hands had been unexpected, but the plan he'd laid was still in play. He, too, was a pawn in this game. He couldn't extricate himself too early. Still, getting under Feng Xiao's skin in the process wasn't a bad deal at all. At the auctioneer's reminder, the crowd finally settled. No one made a higher bid for the jade, so Feng Xiao won it without further disruption. Several more treasures were unveiled, and the crowd began vying for them. But Feng Xiao no longer participated. He waited for the auction to end, then swept out of Lin Lang Pavilion's auction hall and returned to Qiushan Manor with Pei Jingzhe and Cui Buchu trailing behind him. "Abbot Sui's tongue is too sharp. You ruined my lord's reputation with that little speech." Pei Jingzhe recalled the scene at the table and felt a wave of frustration. His tongue wasn't so quick as Feng Xiao's, and at the time, he hadn't managed to think of anything impactful to say. And if he'd struck Cui Buchu, it would only have reinforced his claims. "My body is still full of incense of helplessness you drugged me with. Am I not permitted to vent my anger?" "I could have vomited blood back there to substantiate my words. That I didn't was already showing you more respect than you deserve." Cui Buchu's expression was mild, without the rancor he'd previously affected. He sat there, all his previous intensity extinguished, as tranquil as the distant, misty mountains. Pei Jingzhe was deeply unhappy. "Then go ahead and vomit some blood. Let's see it." As soon as he said it, Cui Buchu opened his mouth and coughed. Red seeped between his lips and splattered over his clothes. Pei Jingzhe practically leapt 3 feet into the air, ready to run up to Cui Buchu and check his vitals. Feng Xiao's voice drifted over. "Fool, it's just mulberry juice." This is so stupid. Getting a hold of himself, Pei Jingzhe examined it. The color was indeed not the dark crimson of blood, but instead a purplish red. Pei Jingzhe was silent. Cui Buchu raised his sleeve and calmly wiped the juice away from his lips. He didn't seem the slightest bit embarrassed at being exposed. "Pardon, I choked." Pei Jingzhe's eyes twitched uncontrollably as he remembered that, back at the Lin Lang Pavilion, the maid had brought several fruit drinks. Cui Buchu had asked for mulberry juice, but to keep the juice in his mouth for that long, only to spit it out now, who would do such a thing? Feng Xiao only smiled. "Oh, Chu-Chu, I find you more and more pleasing to the eye. You really won't consider joining the Zhejian Bureau? The position of 4th chief is waiting for you. The words on an upright gentleman are like swift horses. Once released, they can't be taken back." "Upright gentleman? Are you one?" "All right," said Feng Xiao. "Even if I'm not an upright gentleman, the words of a scoundrel are surely worth a horse or two, no? Or is your standing within the Zuoyue Bureau higher than I'd imagined? I've already said I've never heard of any Zuoyue Bureau. Then let's talk about the jade. Feng Xiao gestured for Pei Jingzhi to place the jade he'd bought on the table. It shimmered in the sunlight, scattering rays in all directions. They could almost see their own reflections in the jade's lustrous surface. Earlier, 6 people joined the bidding, including me. Do you know who they are? Cui Buqu hummed in affirmation. Lin Yong from Yangdang Mountain Estate, Zhou Pei, a wealthy merchant from Khotan, Cui Hao from the Cui family of Boling, Go Nyong, a Gogurian, Zhang Yingshui from the Zhang family of Anlu. He'd clearly expected the question and reported each person's name and background without a moment's hesitation. Whom among them do you find the most suspicious? Pei Jingzhi had thought Cui Buqu would retort with something like, how should I know? But for once, he cooperated. Zhou Pei. His father is a Gokturk, and they say he's the younger cousin of Fo'ar, the foremost martial artist under Ishbara Kagan. He's the most suspicious, along with the martial artist from Goguryeo, Go Nyong. Chapter 17. Jiang Zuan Boldi wasn't a man who indulged in pleasure. With the eyes of others, he was an ascetic. At the Zuoyue Bureau, he spent his spare time brewing tea and reciting scripture, his days more monotonous than a monk's. He didn't consider this lifestyle punishment. In fact, he was quite content. Yet, at that moment, he was sitting within a boudoir men flocked to, watching a dance that had bewitched half the city. Snow-white ankles twirled and golden bells jingled. Despite the sensual atmosphere, Jiang Zuan wasn't relaxed. He sat straight as a poker, hands clasped together and prayer beads tucked against his palms, watching with rapt attention. He looked less like he was enjoying a dance and more like he was watching a demonstration of unparalleled martial arts. The maiden Yun Yun had danced for all sorts at Chunxiang House. Even under his scorching gaze, she finished her dance with grace. Was it beautiful? She asked with a smile, taking the handkerchief from her maid and dabbing at the slight sheen of sweat on her forehead. It was. Jiang Zuan said only 2 words, but to Yun Yun's ears, they were far more sincere than the lengthy and extravagant praise she received from others. Then tonight you'll... She stopped. It wasn't the first time she'd tried to keep a guest, but for some reason she found herself unable to go on. Perhaps it was because Jiang Zuan's expression was so solemn. How could he possibly be there to sleep with a prostitute? Though the city had praised maiden Yun Yun's dancing to the skies, extolling her as a treasure money couldn't buy, Yun Yun herself understood that she was no more than a drifting piece of duckweed. She had no control over her fate, no choice but to struggle futilely in the fisherman's net. Jiang Zuan suddenly leaned in. Yun Yun's composure shattered. He'd rushed from her neck to her cheeks, and her body stopped obeying her orders. She found herself unable to retreat, frozen as his proximity overwhelmed her. "The fragrance you're wearing," said Jiang Zuan. "It's very unique." Yun Yun's face was scarlet, and her ears were hot. Yes, it's the scent of mandarins, with a note of grass and trees. It's a lovely scent." Now the 2 of them were practically pressed up against each other. A strong arm looped around Yun Yun's slender waist, fixing her to the spot. Yet her heart beat faster and faster. This man was more handsome, more full of strength and vigor than anyone she'd ever met. They were even linked by fate. "Did you create this perfume yourself?" Jiang Zuan Bodhi asked. Confused and infatuated, Yun Yun dropped her guard entirely. "No, someone created it for me." "Ask her to make one for me as well." "All right," Yun Yun murmured. Puzzled, she realized he'd released her. "It's not dark yet," said Jiang Zuan. Yun Yun flushed. It was true that it was inappropriate to indulge in such activities during the day. Even if propriety was of little concern within Chunxiang House, She wanted to leave the best possible impression on Jiangxun. Then what does this gentleman wish to do? Shall I perform another dance for you? She tucked her hair back, her crimson lips slightly parted. I wish to paint you, said Jiangxun boldly. Yun was taken aback. I've seen the dancers and musicians of the palace, he said, and you are just as skilled as them. I wish to paint you so you can see what I see. If a promiscuous young master had uttered those words, she'd have brushed them aside with a smile. But Jiangxun Bodi's gaze was steady, his expression earnest. She believed him completely. No one had ever said they wished to paint her before. Yun lowered her head in thought. When she looked up again, it was with a radiant smile. All right. Outside, the maid Hong Ju had approached with food and wine only to find the doors tightly shut. No sound could be heard from within. She stopped, feeling a hint of nervous excitement, then quietly nudged the door open a crack with her shoulder and peered through the gauzy curtains. Yet she didn't see the amorous scene she'd imagined. Instead, Yun was posing with her back to the door. Hong Ju snuck a peek at the uninvited customer who'd barged in offering a huge sum of money. He wasn't embracing or kissing the beauty. Instead, he was standing before the desk, brush sweeping back and forth as he painted. Hong Ju watched the hazy outline of Jiangxun Bodi for a while, her eyes filled with unconcealed envy. But the pair inside the room continued, oblivious to their audience. Finally, she grew bored. Pursing her lips, she turned and left soundlessly, taking the food and drink back to her own room to enjoy. She was completely unaware that another white figure had been watching behind her. Initially, Xiao Xian had wanted to restrain and question the maid, but on seeing her actions, she reconsidered. Everyone had their weaknesses. Having weaknesses wasn't frightening, but being unable to find them was. And Hongju's weakness was obvious. Questioning her using a different method might be more effective. Back at Qiushan Manor, Cui Buqu looked at the suspected jade of Heaven Lake and said slowly, Goguryeo is currently ruled by Gotang, as King Pyongyan of Goguryeo, the 25th generation ruler. Go is a Goguryeo surname. Though few people in the Central Plains know Go Nyong, he's quite famous in Goguryeo. It's said he achieved transcendence in his swordsmanship and defeated 12 preeminent experts in the 3 kingdoms of Goguryeo, Baekje, and Silla in the space of 10 days. Pyongwan was delighted and bestowed the title of Goguryeo's #1 sword expert on him. He's even permitted to carry his sword and ride horses within the palace grounds. In Goguryeo, this is the highest of honors. Pei Jingzhe, who had just been the victim of Cui Buqu's little prank, was still unhappy. He said irritably, Goguryeo is a small nation in the corner of the northeast. I fear their naming someone a preeminent expert is no more than a boast. He can't compare to the martial artists of the Central Plains. Cui Buqu gave a rare nod of agreement. Correct. However, it is highly likely Go Nyong is after the jade's medicinal properties. Like all martial artists, he wishes to climb to higher heights. It's not uncommon for martial artists to plateau and make no progress their entire lives. With the jade's assistance, perhaps he can find a shortcut to the heavens. But that's only hearsay, said Pei Jingzhe. No one knows whether the jade really has such a power. Hearsay is enough. As long as there's some hope, there will be people willing to take risks. Feng Xiao rapped on the table. Back to the matter at hand. What do you think? If you wanted to steal something, would you expose it to the public eye and draw everyone's attention? Pei Jingzhe considered it. I'd get someone inside Linlong Pavilion to have the jade listed as one of the auction's items, then quietly snatch it out from under their noses. A connection with Linlong Pavilion would also make it easy to avoid detection when leaving the city. The head broker, Wen Liang, would have been able to do it, but he's still in prison. Could it be that Wen Liang's arrest ruined their plans, and that's why the jade appeared at the auction? Feng Xiao shook his head. Things couldn't be that simple. He was certain he'd missed a link somewhere. This case looked straightforward at a glance. A murder and robbery. But as he disentangled each element bit by bit, he realized how intricate it was. Thread wound tightly around thread. Whenever they managed to hit on a promising lead, it was upended the next moment. Feng Xiao felt the presence of several invisible hands, all trying to scramble the chessboard. Some attempted to conceal their own motives, while others attempted to obscure the facts of the case. At that thought, he couldn't help looking at Cui Buchu. Cui Buchu noticed his gaze and met it, frank and impassive. Each suppressed a cold smile. Damn fox, Feng Xiao thought, sneering to himself. Swaggering oleander spirit. Cui Buchu curved his lips in secret amusement. The oleander flower, beautiful but toxic, it was perfect for Feng Xiao. Pei Jingzhe paid no heed to the undercurrents surging between the two. After a long bout of careful consideration, he asked hesitantly, "Could there be two Jades of Heaven Lake? A fake we have and a real one elsewhere?" Okay. We have made it through more chapters. I decided to tack 2 more on than I intended to read, or was it 3? I don't remember. 2. This was a lot. Okay. I'm so sorry that I just couldn't stop laughing. There were so many moments that just deserved laughter. That's really all I can say. So let's go ahead and review my notes, shall we? And I'm going to start from the top. So I may have said it in previous stories, who knows, but new people always come. So Nyangzi was mentioned. For those who don't know, that's just a way to say lady. So Nyangzi, and that zi is a zi. Remember, z in Mandarin is going to be like ds in kids. So not just z, but z. Okay, now let's go to the next thing. I thought it was so funny that Feng Xiao was already trying to poach Cui Buchu from the Zuoyue Bureau. And it's also nice that we finally got like his official identity. We know that he is the Lord Chief of the Zuoyue Bureau. So the next thing I have to say, I absolutely love this nickname that he's given him. I meant to say it last video. At least I think he said it. Choo Choo. It's so cute. It's so cute. And for those of you who are reading the book, in case you're wondering, and if you haven't seen my Mandarin lessons for Danmei video, it's not choo choo, like chewing on something or like a train. Whenever the letter U follows the Q, it's going to be like U with an E behind it. So just say ooh, keep your lips the same, but try to make the E sound. So ooh, and you'll feel your tongue change too. Ooh, your tongue will lift. So choo choo, not choo choo, choo choo. But nevertheless, I mean, if you say choo choo, who's going to care? So from these chapters, I definitely, yes, have to say that Feng Xiao is Yan Wushi 2.0. He's just a later one. He's crazy. Now, the thing that I will say, of course, that's different so far, maybe, from Yan Wushi and Feng Xiao, is that Feng Xiao doesn't seem unnecessarily cruel. Like, he's not doing absolutely horrible things. So that's the difference. But I'm talking about like his personality and his flirtatious manner and just being annoying while being very, very good looking. Woo! So the other thing is that the reason I say that as well is from when he called Cui Buchu Cui. I was like, there we go. Qiao. Cui. But yeah, I still like Choo Choo better because it's just so cute. So my question to you guys is, who do you think is going to fall first? I mean, we don't know. It could happen simultaneously. It's definitely going to be something that happens over time rather than like, in a moment, like, oh, I like this person. Because clearly they ain't friends. So who do you think will fall first? And I'm kind of torn because there's a part of me that wants to say it's going to be Feng Xiao since he already has so much curiosity and is taken some kind of liking to Cui Buchu, even if it's not romantic. But then the other part of me is just like, well, that's just his character. He could be interested in those types of things. But I'm wondering if maybe it will be Cui Buchu. He's so annoyed with him now and clearly dislikes him. But maybe over time, as they share moments, he might find himself falling. So, anyway, that's all theory for now. We'll see in the future, but I'd love to know. So the next thing I want to talk about is this Jiangsu and Bodhi and Yun Yun. The moments between them are just so lovely. And I really like it. It's kind of like a side story thing, although not a side story because apparently it's very much related to the case of this murder and the Jade of Heaven Lake. But getting a little backstory on him being saved by Nyang, the little Yun Yun lady, it's like, oh, that's such a sweet story. And for him to like return to her and be like, I could free you from this life. It was just so cute. Oh, it was just so cute. And then she's totally smitten with him. Even though, unfortunately, he's genuine, but he's totally using her to get the smell of that fragrance, which I'm going to assume that the fragrance is the exact one they're looking for, that plum blossom fragrance. So, we'll see where that lead goes. Anyway, let us go turn our books to page 144. Sorry, I'm turning. So, with this little fiasco of Cui Buchu and Feng Xiao in the Linlong Pavilion, creating this weird scene of like, oh, you took my sister and now you're trying to take me too. Which is so stupid. But so hilarious. And, Feng Xiao was just like, I'm ready for this. You think you can outshine me in this little game? I got you. But then it was like, no, I am Cui Buchu. You cannot outshine me in this moment. Let me go ahead and show you my skills. So then we have Feng Xiao thinking, like he realized there was always a higher mountain, always a greater man. So this is an actual proverb in Mandarin, which maybe it's one in English too. I don't know. I've literally never heard it in my entire life, at least not in that way. And so I wanted to share with you all how to say it. There technically, I think, are two ways you can go about saying this. So I'm going to share the first one and the second one. The first one is Yishan Haibi, Yishan Gao. So the first word is yi, 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 and then shan. So they're both the same tone. Hai, that is the second tone going up. Bi, do that vocal fry. And then again, Yishan, and Gao is the same tone as well. So Yishan Haibi, Yishan Gao. Very simple. Now, the other option, obviously, I'm sorry, Yishan Haibi. It's like one mountain there is compared to, another one, which is higher. So I worded that kind of weird, but I think you guys get the gist. So the next one is Shan Wai Yo Shan, Zhen Wai Yo Zhen. So that is Shan Wai, fourth tone. Yo, vocal fry for the third tone, shan, zhen, which is the second tone, and that's R-E-N, so it's not going to be ren, although you can say that as well, but it's kind of like S-H-J, like ren, but with the zh sound behind it, not zh sound, but zh, so zhen, Y, yo, zhen. So it's basically saying, shan is mountain, by the way. I don't think I said that in the previous one. Shan is mountain. Y is like outside, like Waizhen would be a foreigner, or Waixingzhen would be an alien, because they're outside the star people. Yo is to have. Shan, so mountain outside has mountain. Another way of saying outside of this mountain, there are more mountains. And then zhen, which is person or people. We'll just say person. Y, still outside, yo zhen. So outside of this person or outside of person, there are more people. So another way of saying, yeah, this mountain is great. There's always a greater mountain. This person is great. There is always a greater person. So yes, I just thought I'd share that with you guys. I don't really give you proverbs or expressions that often, usually just sticking to little pieces of vocabulary, but I thought I'd share that. Speaking of vocabulary, which I had to do this for Thousand Autumns as well. Every now and then there are names in here that are not Mandarin, and they are Korean. So I'm having to look up how to say these things because I want to say them as correctly as possible, though I could still be wrong. But I do know how to say 안녕하세요, which is hello. So nyong is the 안녕 part of that. So the person go nyong, I just wanted to let you guys know that is Korean. And then the other name that was mentioned, the King Pyongwan, that is also Korean. Anything coming from Goguryeo, Baekje, those are all Korean things. So I didn't study Korean. I haven't, not yet. But anyway. So another thing I wanted to mention, which, I'm backtracking, about Jang Soo-in and Yoon Yoon. Okay. Hongju, were you trying to spy on them doing the freaky deaky? Because what? It said she was excited to peek in and see what they were doing, especially since it was so quiet. Girl, you nasty. Anyway, the next thing I want to say is about oleander. So I'm sure you guys understand because they actually gave a tiny little explanation when it said the oleander flower, beautiful but toxic. It was perfect for Feng Xiao. Feng Xiao. So the oleander is a poisonous evergreen shrub, and the symbolism of it is love, beauty, resilience, and because of its toxicity, danger. So absolutely, it fits Feng Xiao quite perfectly. He's beautiful, yet a nuisance. I know nuisance isn't the same as toxic, but I'm gonna call him a nuisance. So anyway, that is all. Please tell me how you guys are enjoying this story because I'm enjoying it a lot. I'm tempted to just keep reading and keep reading and keep reading, but I do have other things that I need to do in life. But yeah, we're going to probably breeze our way through this one, which, is totally fine. And I think for me personally, I can tell when I really like a story, really, really like a story, because I just want to keep reading it so freaking much. And honestly, for the stories that I have read on my channel so far, I've only felt that way about 2 of them. And obviously, I'm sure you guys know, other than this one, it's, 1,000 Autumns. Meng Xi sure has my heart. Don't get me wrong, Stars of Chaos was very good and I wanted to keep reading, but there were some moments where I was kind of okay, I need to read. And the same thing with The Disabled Tyrant's Beloved Pet Fish. Although I will say the last book was my favorite book, and so I wanted to get through that one because I was I need to know what's happening. So yeah, I can really tell that I'm enjoying this one. I hope you all are enjoying this one as well, and I can't wait to see just where things go. So I hope you all enjoy the rest of your day or have a beautiful night's rest. I'll see you all next time. Well, I'm Neiman.